Hey guys, welcome to another edition of my pool plan video. This time around, I will be covering the events and banners where Fusoya and Kaler will be the featured synergy units. This time around, I will also be covering another character, and that will be Papalymo. Reason for that is that Papalymo has been announced to be a first featured simultaneous release across both the global and Japan version of the game. Papalymo will be featured alongside Fusoya and Karen in the upcoming event where we will be doing Fusoya's Lost Chapters. As always, I will also be including a timestamp that you can use to skip ahead to the section that you are most interested in. First off, a quick look on how I did on recent banners, starting from Saltia's event all the way up to the recent Fujin event. Essentially, I skipped all the banners. I really only was interested in Saltia's for the LD call ability, and luckily enough I got his EX and LD for free, so I did not have to spend any further resource. It isn't the same case for Fujin though. I started off with tickets for Fujin, actually got her FR for free but did not get her BT, and after 500 tickets I got 4 copies of her FR and still no BT. So I switched over to gems, and unfortunately I had to spend the full PT, which was 80,000 gems after discounting the free multis. So Fujin really hit me hard, and overall at least I guess I also got like 7 copies of Zidane's FR along the way, so wasn't a real total waste of resources, but not gonna lie, that really hurt my stash. So in total, I spent 500 tickets and 80,000 gems, but they all came from one banner. Alright, so coming to Fusoya's Lost Chapters, there will be 2 banners here, the first featuring Fusoya and the second featuring Karen. Both characters will be receiving a rework. Fusoya will be getting a new BT weapon, whereas Karen will be getting a new FR weapon. Starting off with Fusoya, he gets a rework across his S1, S2, EX, LD and FR, so essentially his entire kit. Notable though is his EX, which after rework will be 9 HP dumps, and his EX buff also offers stronger potencies and HP damage up effect. Fusoya's force conditionals have also been bumped up in the percentage increase to be more in line with the current meta, but importantly also, during Fusoya's force time, the entire party now also gets an additional plus 50% HP damage and 50% HP damage cap up. As mentioned, Fusoya will be getting a new BT weapon. Upon use, Fusoya gets a 6-turn BT aura that provides the party with brave damage plus 20%, brave damage cap plus 50%, HP damage plus 20% and HP damage cap plus 30%, which is pretty standard fare for most PT auras nowadays. In addition, while Fusoya's PT aura is up, any debuffs inflicted by Fusoya will be getting an additional plus 1 turn in duration. Finally, and I think also importantly, Fusoya's EX will also automatically charge to 100% every time he takes a turn while his PT aura is up, essentially getting the same treatment as Null there. And this is why I also specifically mentioned that his EX is now 9 HP dumps, meaning that while his BT aura is up, he can just spam his EX every turn, which is also his hardest hitting attack and dealing some somewhat decent damage overall. Moving on to Karen, Karen's S2, EX, LD all also receives a damage rework. His Holira strike will now be 7 HP dumps, and his LD will now be 8 HP dumps, which is I guess somewhat decent in the current meta. Karen's BT gets a rework on the auras that it provides. Now on top with all the other auras that it used to give, it also gives the entire party HP damage and HP damage cap up plus 50% if Karen is at 5 stacks of Mir. Considering that Karen's LD buff sort of locks his stacks at 5, this is more or less guaranteed all the time. On this event, Karen gets a new force weapon. Upon use, Karen's force will extend his own buffs by 2 turns. Karen's force effects are firstly having two conditionals, the first of which is if you end your turn while having an overhead you get plus 40%, and the second is if you recover your brave during your turn you get plus 40% for a total of 80% potentially. Beyond that, during Karen's force time, Karen's S1, S2 and additional ability users will not get consumed. And his FR also provides the entire party with HP damage and HP damage cap plus 50%, again only if Karen is at 5 stacks of Mir. The standout here really is the bonus to HP damage and HP damage cap up. If Karen's PT aura and his force time are both up, this will stack and will provide the entire party with 100% HP damage and HP damage cap up. Overall, both characters are decent and I will be going more in depth into my opinion and evaluation in the later part of this video. But overall, my plans here really is to skip both these banners. I don't really have a lot of interest in both of them, and my PT ingots are actually already running pretty low at this stage. But that's not all. On this event, we will also be getting Papalymo released. At this point, I don't think we have information yet on what sort of banner Papalymo will appear on. Papalymo will get a rework across his entire kit, and based on the teaser trailer that the devs released, it looks like it's going to be a massive damage rework across his S1, S2 as well as his instant turn attacks, which is Xenoglossy and Foul. However, the exact changes are not known yet at the time of this video, including how many HP dumps those are. Coming to Papalymo's PT, upon use his PT will give him a 10 turn aura, which seems long, but don't forget that Papalymo has a lot of instant turn abilities in his kit, so the 10 turns doesn't actually last too long, especially if you are spamming his instant turn attacks. His PT will provide the entire party with party brave gains up, brave damage and brave damage cap up, and HP damage and HP damage cap up. Again, the exact percentages were not released yet, but I wouldn't imagine that they will be too far beyond the current meta that we have. In addition, while Papalymo's PT aura is up, the entire party gains additional effects, but this will be dependent on which stance Papalymo is in. Papalymo has two different stances based on his S1 or S2. His S1 is Astral Fire and will enter into the Fire stance, and upon use of his S2 Umbral Ice, Papalymo will be in the Ice stance instead, depending on the stance. So if he's in his Fire stance, the entire party also will ignore enemies' defense, will get double brave hits, and this is the similar effect as Precious LD. And finally, his entire party, or the entire party, will get Fire Enchant. Upon use of Umbral Ice and entering the Ice stance instead, these effects will be changed to Brave gains per every Brave hit. This is similar to Charlotta's PT or the Kate Sith Call effect. You will also get Brave gains after every field turn, and the amount of Brave you gain is based off your character attack stat. In addition, the entire party will also get Ice Enchant. This means that Papalymo is now effectively also a party elemental enchanter and impaler. If that's not enough, that's not all. His BT also will land a debuff on all enemies upon use in a similar fashion to Celsius's PT, except that this wouldn't be a gold frame debuff, it's just a silver frame, and it lasts for 6 turns as opposed to Celsius's 8 turns. However, this debuff will also cause all enemies to be unable to act, so it's also a disable. It also causes HP damage received up effect, and one more additional effect which causes the enemies to suffer additional HP damage each time they get attacked, and this will be based on the total HP damage received. Now at this point of the video, I'm not entirely sure whether this effect is similar to Leo's true HP damage effect, or will it be somewhat similar to Wise's additional bonus HP damage. If it's Wise's, it's obviously going to be better because that will scale off the force bonus percentages, and I think it is probably more likely to be similar to Wise. But unfortunately, as of now, I don't think the devs have released more specific information yet, so there's no confirmation and we'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to Papalymo's newly released FR, one interesting thing is that Papalymo's force attack is instant and also free turn, it does not increase the turn count. Papalymo's FR has two conditionals, the first requiring you to do a magic attack on your turn, and the second requiring you to do an elemental attack on your turn. Now the exact percentage increase hasn't also been released yet, but just based off the teaser trailer that they've shown, it looks like the total is roughly around 80%, so my guess is that it's going to be plus 40% each, but let's see. Beyond these two conditionals, I don't think Papalymo's FR has any additional effects or bonuses to the party. My plan here on this banner really depends, and the issue I'm having is I'm not entirely sure how much of a rework he got across his entire kit. Since we are getting a simultaneous release with the JP version of the game, my guesstimate is that it will be a pretty sizable rework and his damage will skyrocket. So if that's the case, I will likely pull for him, but the jury is out and I'll just have to wait and see exactly how much of a rework he gets. Moving on to the 6 Warrior Quest Area 8, and this event will feature a return of Edgar without the rework, but also Kader with rework and a newly released FRPT. So focusing more on Kader since Edgar doesn't have a rework. Kader's S1 will get a damage rework, and one important thing about the rework here also is that the S1 will deal splash on the last HP dump, and because it does splash damage across all enemies, Kader's S1 will now apply the lock debuff on all enemies as well. Another important aspect of Kader's rework is that her counter attack now has 3 HP dumps. Kader's EX and trap damage has also been reworked. The EX is now 5 HP dumps and the trap I believe is now 4 HP dumps. The EX buff also has been improved and it now carries also a plus 30% evasion stat, and this is pretty good overall for Kader. Prior to this rework, Kader has a max evasion of 90% only, and this assumes you have the Ramuh and Shiva evasion, which means that there is still a small chance that enemies can land attacks on Kader. With the rework and the additional evasion, this is no longer an issue and Kader will have 100% evasion. Kader's LD, White Shot and Charge Shot, which is the modified breath and HP damage attack, has also been reworked in terms of the damage output, more in line with the current meta. The White Shot I believe is around the ballpark of 5 HP dumps AoE, whereas the Charge Shot is single target but is 9 HP dumps. Kader's BT weapon is also pretty powerful. The BT gives her an 8 turn aura, which is pretty good in duration, and upon use while the BT aura is up, the entire party will get evasion plus 100%, brave damage plus 50%, brave damage cap plus 50%, HP damage plus 20%, and HP damage cap plus 30%. The juicy thing of course was the party evasion, which makes all party members evade attacks. On top of this, and importantly, Kader will also trigger her counter twice while her BT aura is up, and this is why I mentioned the rework across the counter. Since each counter is 3 HP dumps, essentially while the BT is up, Kader gets an additional 6 HP dumps every time an enemy attacks her. Moving on to Kader's FR, upon use Kader's FR will buff herself with her 8 turns charge and dodge buff. This is the same buff as the one that her S2 provides. Her FR has 2 conditionals, the first just requiring you to do an ice attack, and this includes any ice attack including off turn or counters for 5%, and similar to Rydia, anytime you evade an attack you get plus 50%. This combos and synergizes very well with her BT since her BT gives the entire party 100% evasion. While you are in Kader's force time as well, the entire party will get Ice Enchant, making the first conditional very easy to meet. All enemies will get the Brave Freeze effect similar to her LD debuff, And if you do an elemental weakness attack, you also get a bonus HP damage and HP damage cap plus 30%. I have to say, I am very impressed with Kayda's rework, BT and FR. It really fixes a lot of the issues that she used to have in the past. So my plan here is to go in for Kayda's FRBT. I do really hope I get both weapons on tickets, but I will use gems if I have to. So in this part of the video, I'll be covering my evaluation and opinion on all the characters discussed in this video, as well as who I generally recommend if you have limited resources. Generally, I rate characters only across two categories. The first is the good value category, and these are characters that will provide you good value regardless of what you already have in your roster, just by virtue of how good their kit is. The second category I call as role fulfillment, and characters here are still somewhat good. The only thing is that depending on your roster, you may already have other characters who can do the same thing, in which case, you can probably get by without pulling for these characters. This time around, I put Kayda in a good value category, and might be a bit of bias here, but I really like how her kit has evolved. If you really think that Calgar is powerful, I think Kayda is no slouch either. I don't think she's better than Calgar, but they function in very similar manner. Plus, at least Kayda also have the Brave Freeze effect from her LD and her FR. And to me, one of the highlights here on her kit is that her rework will also enable her to solo a number of stages. And in this game, when you have a wide variety of characters in your roster, the key really is to be able to do lockout contents such as Dare to Defy or the Dimensions End series. In which case, I think characters that can solo stages get extra value for that reason, so I place Kayda at a higher category here. Moving on to Papalymo, I sort of put Papalymo as half and half, and the only reason for that is that at this point I still don't know the extent of the rework across his kit. If it is good enough to the point where he's on par with the top tier DPS in the JP version of the game, that would mean that we get Papalymo essentially about 4 months earlier than expected, in which case he would be extremely strong and will likely be in a good value category. I actually do think that is probably the most likely scenario, but if his rework across his S1, S2 and his instant turn attacks are a little bit underwhelming, say maybe 7 or 8 HP dumps, then probably not as much. There are already many competent DPSs, and personally for me as well, I don't really value the long turn disable durations because I generally don't use them. That is obviously an individual thing. If you are a newer player and you do runs where the enemies get multiple turns, the long duration disable do have value, in which case I think Papalymo is actually a good choice. On that regards though, we did actually recently get Celtius, and Celtius himself does do decent damage alongside having an 8 turn disable as well. But overall, I think Papalymo still has more to offer in terms of the BT aura and the fact that entering his fire or ice stance does provide the entire party with different powerful effects as well, so that is also something worthy of consideration. Moving on to Karin. Karin actually is pretty decent overall. He has very strong support auras for the party, and with the rework and his FRBT, he now can also easily provide the entire party with HP damage and HP damage cap plus 100%. Damage wise though, he really isn't top tier. His kit does about 7 or 8 HP dumps each, but I don't think that's really an issue because Karin himself isn't meant to be a dedicated DPS, and for a support unit, doing 7 to 8 HP dumps per turn is actually pretty good. So if you don't really have a lot of support units and you really want a support aura bot type character, then Karin is a decent pickup. But if you feel that you already have enough of those in your roster, then similarly I think you can also get by without pulling for him. Moving on to the last two characters here, Fusoya and Edgar, and I placed them both on the far right hand side. Honestly, and this might be a bit harsh towards both of them, but I really don't think there's any reason to pick both of them up. And I start off with Edgar. Edgar doesn't even get a rework here. The only thing that sets Edgar apart from other characters is that Edgar can land the 3 weapon type imperils, which is melee, range and magic imperil. And really, Edgar is the only character in the game who can land all 3 weapon type imperils. There are other characters who can land one of the 3, but the issue really is that in this game, weapon type imperils are actually not very useful. Of all stages we've ever had and likely will ever have, there's really only one stage that requires you to have all 3 weapon imperils, and that is the Shiva Spiritus stage. So I suppose if you are having a lot of trouble on that stage, then you can maybe get Edgar, maybe even up to his LD only. That's really enough. He can land all 3 imperils as long as you have his LD. In most cases though, you can get by with Elemental, Enchant and Imperil, and that will already allow you to do weakness damage, and there are tons of characters who can give you that utility, and therefore you don't really need Edgar. Moving on to Fusoya. Now Fusoya does provide some very good utility because Fusoya can land multi-turn disables. So he does have utility that not many other characters have. The issue with Fusoya is that he is competing against both Celtius, who was recently released, and Celtius will do way more damage than Fusoya. And Fusoya is also going to be competing against Pepperlimo, who will be releasing on the same day. I think if you want a character that can land a disable that lasts for many turns, you'd probably be better off going for either Celtius or Pepperlimo, because both those characters offer way much more beyond that compared to Fusoya. Fusoya does also provide the utility of Brave gains based on your initial Brave stat, but really I don't think that's useful or unique enough to warrant pulling for him. Of course, Fusoya doesn't do terrible damage. He can spam EX every turn while his PT aura is up, and his EX does 9 HP dumps. But he is released alongside Celtius. Celtius can do 11 HP dumps per turn through his Crystal Diver attack. And although we don't know for sure how many dumps Pepperlimo has, I think it's safe to say that Pepperlimo will very likely out-damage Fusoya. So really nothing against Fusoya, it's just that he is a victim of wrong release timing, and he is competing against 2 very strong characters who can do very similar things to what he can and probably provide you with even more things than him. So that's it for this pool plan video. In summary, the main character that I'll be going for is Kader FRBT. The jury's still out for Pepperlimo, but I will likely be pulling for him. The biggest issue I have is the bottleneck on BT ingots. I currently only have enough ingots to green 1 more BT, so I'm hoping that they will give us more across the next few events, in which case I can pull for both the units. But if I have to choose one of the 2, it will be either Kader or Pepperlimo, leaning more towards Kader, but if Pepperlimo's damage rework is so massive and he becomes the DPS god because of his early release in GL, then in which case I will likely be pulling for him instead. But let's see. That's it for this pool plan video. As always, I hope that the video has been useful, and if you enjoyed the content, do leave a like, comment or subscribe. Till then, I'll catch you guys in the next pool plan video. Bye!